If you're familiar with my work, you know that my background is journalism. I have 2 degrees in journalism, master's in magazine publishing from Northwestern, and I've been a freelance writer for a very long time. We'll put it like that. If I put an age to it, it'll make me feel really, really old, and it'll be embarrassing. But being a freelance writer is different because you have to always be closing, as they used to say in Glengarry Glen Ross. I wouldn't recommend anything else from the movie, classic movie. But that thing, ABC, that's a big part of it. Because when you're an independent writer, or you're doing independent writing on the side, which is totally cool too, you have to continually find out who you're going to write for first. Now, I'm not talking about blogging for yourself, or even in my case where I have this TV show with BringYourWorth.tv. I'm talking about actually contributing to the Playboys, the New York Post, the ARPs, the Family Circles, a lot of these publications that I've been fortunate enough to contribute to over the years. So today's Q&A is going to talk about that, talking about writing for mainstream and even slightly avant-garde, which I've done, publications, newspapers, magazines, websites, whatever, it will work. Even if it's a blog, I'm talking about blogs that are actually owned by someone else that's actually part of a bigger system. So we're talking more mainstream versus I want to start creating. That's a different discussion. So today we're going to talk about the best tools, and I'm also going to share the biggest questions that I get from people who are interested in freelancing and where to start with it. The first question I often get is, no pun intended, I kind of buried the lead there and kind of spoiled the lead too. How do I start? How do I start and begin freelance writing? So freelance writing, basic definition. You approach a publication and you say, hey, I want to do this particular article for this particular audience. Your audience happens to match the audience I want to reach, and I would like to do this article. It's called a pitch. We'll get into the pitch in a second. So just like you would pitch anything else, you know, when if you work for a coffee shop and someone comes up and they're like, well, I'm not sure what I want. And you say, well, you try our new Frappuccino. Or if you really want to push it, you can do this. It's the same type of thing. You are serving this greater publication. And in my case, I've written a long time for Playboy. So the topics that I wanted to cover fit Playboy's demographic really well for many, many years. And so it breaks down to 3 different things. And I took some notes on this to make sure it was super clear to y'all. And clear to me too. Sometimes you do things for so long and then you have to explain it to someone else. And you're like, wait a second. You start with an important topic, a topic that might be important to you, but more importantly is important to a particular audience that you want to serve. Number 2, you have to explain or show why you're the one to write it. Why are you the one to write it? Do you have access to certain people that you interview for this article? Are you an expert or know a lot about this particular topic? And so that makes you uniquely qualified. And lastly, how you can actually reach the group that needs to hear it. And that would help determine what publication you would pitch something for. So if it was something about the benefits of retiring early, let's say in your 50s, that might not work for Playboy magazine because the demographic that they're aiming for are, say, 24 to 45, right? But for ARP magazine, who I've been a regular writer for a while, and I used to have a column with them, a video game column, believe it or not, about 10, 20 years ago, long time ago, that would be ideal for them because they're trying to set it up so that people will understand and think about retirement. And it might not be their exact demographic because the person that gets ARP might be already in retirement, but they might be able to pass it on to some of their kids who are thinking about retirement. And also the ARP crowd is more likely to be talking about retirement than the Playboy crowd, because the Playboy crowd, the guys that read it and gals, whomever, they're not trying to think about retirement. The Playboy has the energy of a youthful publication. So you have to kind of think about what the topic is, why it's important, why you have a certain expertise in it, and how you should use that particular publication or work with that publication to get it out there. Hopefully that makes sense. Drop a line in the comments if there's any other details that you're curious about. That's the best way I can describe what's called a query or a pitch. If you want to go a little bit deeper, and in fact, this will be, I think, one of the first steps, check out the American Society of Journalists and Authors. I was already hyping them up at the beginning of the show. Fantastic organization. They, along with the Writers Guild, are the two premier writers organizations. You can call them unions if you like, based here in North America, and particularly in the United States, obviously with ASJA. But we have a lot of Canadian members, so shout out to you guys. You know who you are. ASJA is fantastic because they have conferences. Again, I keynoted a few months ago. They have conferences throughout the year, some of them virtual. A lot of them, though, which is where I got my bones at and really got a chance to network with people, was when they had them in person in Midtown Manhattan. I have so many memories, excuse me, and people that I'm still cool with to this day, and people that, like, all these books right here are books I've contributed to, books I've published. Many of them would not have happened without either learning from ASJA or the connections connected to ASJA, as far as being in New York, connecting with different folks, or even virtually. And there's so many things that even come from ASJA now, even though a lot of it is remote. So be sure and check them out. I think it's a good first step. There's a certain criteria that you need to hit to become an official member. That's often, they change it every year, but I believe it's like you have to have a couple books published, and or you have to, or more the or, have a couple books published, or have a byline, which is your name, in 6 or more publications that are considered mainstream. That can be a high order. It took me a few years to get to that point when I first started my freelance career, but they have a ton of resources that are available in general for everybody. That's what you want to work with. They also have a Facebook page and other things going on that are available, I believe, to everyone. Be sure and check them out. The resources are infinite on there. And again, the keynote that I did for ASJ a few months ago will be premiering on the channel, audio only, this Sunday. And then there's a link. If you click that link, it'll link over to right below the video. It will actually link to the ASJ packages that allow anybody, whether you're a member or not, to actually get involved, check it out, and watch the whole keynote on its own, you know? Right? And ASJ is fantastic. Yeah, thank you for the note. You know, I'm not hyping them up for no reason. They're fantastic. Like, they're fantastic. And they've been integral to some of the work that I've done, and obviously for some other folks as well. If you want some hard copy material, I do not have a physical copy because I haven't had this joint in a while. The Writer's Market, 100th edition. That's how far back it goes, right? I remember getting the Writer's Market, and I was broke, living in Chicago, in a small apartment, trying to get my freelance on. And the Writer's Market is essentially, I don't even have a book that's the same size of it. Let me just take all my books. If you took my last 3 books, including the one that's coming up, put them together, heck, bring another one. It's that big. That's how big it is. It's huge, right? It's like a Bible. And what it does is they spend the whole year working on this, almost like an almanac, right? They spend the whole year working on this. And then they say, all right, let's use Playboy again for an example. Okay, if you're going to pitch Playboy, these are the main editors there. These are their email addresses and or the submission for their website. This is how often they come out, like, 12 times a year, 10 times a year, whatever. I think they're still monthly, so 12 times a year. This is their circulation, or how many articles, or how many magazines they print every month. So I'm guessing Playboy circulation, nowadays, I'm guessing their circulation is about 7 million. That's just a guess. You can correct me in the comments if you happen to know. So 7 million copies of Playboy go out every month, etc. More importantly, they talk about who the head editors are and how much they pay. We're going to get into that in a second. So it gives you the whole breakdown. You can go to different websites. Shout out to Freelance Success and all these other websites that are on there, which are fantastic. ASJ is one of them. This is actually something, though, where you just want to keep it on your desk. To be like, you know what? I really have an article idea that I want to pitch to Writer's Digest. Who do I reach there? Now, of course, Dr. Google can help take care of you. Shout out to Dr. Google. It changed things because I was doing freelance writing before Google was even invented. That gives you some ideas for how long I've been doing it. But there's certain limitations to how much access you're going to have. And having something physical, again, that big on your desk is important. How do I pitch articles? Pitching articles comes down to three basic things. At least for me, I use a 3-paragraph system whenever I pitch something. So let's say you're talking to Writer's Digest or you're talking to Outside Magazine. Let's work with Outside Magazine. You know what you want to say to Outside Magazine. You have an article idea. You know it will work for them. You got the editor contact, or at least where to submit. Now what? Here's what you can do. Use a 3-paragraph system that has worked for me really, really well. The first paragraph is essentially like the lead or the beginning of your article. In 2019, a bunch of hikers gathered at the bottom of Mount Charleston. Many of them experienced, but some of them had no idea what they were getting into, and they're never heard from again. I just made that up. That's a lead. That's a lead. And if you treat it like article, you'll be like, oh, I want to keep reading. Well, what happened to, why were they never heard from again? And some were experienced, but I guess they weren't experienced enough to deal with whatever happened. Why did the inexperienced folks go to Mount Charleston, which is right here in Las Vegas? Why did they do that? So you want to kind of get their mouth watering, which mine is literally watering. I think I need some coffee. Mouth watering for whatever it is, right? That's the first paragraph, to say, this is like the beginning of the story. Doesn't have to be long, just a few sentences. The second paragraph is saying what you're actually going to give the reader, what the story is and what you're going to give the reader. In the story for Outside Magazine, I'm going to talk about the great storm of 2019 where such and such and such and such. The Outside Magazine readers will like it because such and such and such. So that's paragraph 2. So paragraph 1, basically the beginning of your story. What's your story? Not telling them what the story is. We have this wonderful saying in journalism and also in public speaking, and I'm a public speaking coach as well. Show, don't tell. So you want to show them what the story is going to be. You're not going to tell them what it's going to be. You show them with that first paragraph. The second paragraph, you take a step back and then you start to tell them, I'm going to tell this story about such and such and why it's going to serve their readers. Outside Magazine readers are going to love this because of such and such and such. Bonus points if you can point to a particular article that's similar to the one you want to do. It's similar to the 2015 Outside Magazine article you had about the guy that got his arm stuck in the desert and had to cut it off. It's similar to that, the one they made a movie about. Like that, then they're like, oh, okay, not only do you know our audience, but you're up on our stuff. So you know what we're trying to do for our audience. You're trying to make the editor's job easier. That's what you're doing with the query/pitch. The third paragraph is going to break down why you are the one for the job. So if there was an article in Redbook about being a single mom living in Tehran, I would not be qualified for many reasons to write that article. He's making stuff up. I wouldn't be qualified. But if it was like about an entrepreneur who went through some ups and downs and now is able to figure out how to take care of his family and so forth, okay, I have some expertise in that. That's what the third paragraph is establishing why you are the writer for it. Because you can have a great idea, but if you can't access the people you need to interview for the story, and or if it's more of an opinion, POV perspective piece, if you haven't had the experience for it, then you don't know. I can do an article about selling my company because I sold my company a handful of years ago. I can't do an article about getting funding from other, from like a venture capital firm or from an investment or whatever, because my startups were actually bootstrapped. So I didn't get investment. So I can interview people about it, but I can't say I did that. Third paragraph is where you're going to establish your expertise. Why are you the person for the job? The big secret here is that all magazines have staffs. So they have writers that they full salary, health benefits, 401k, they're set. So even if you didn't approach them, in most cases, with a particular article, they still would find a way to get articles into their magazine because they got a staff. So with that first paragraph, with you telling the beginning of a compelling story, the second paragraph where you're talking about what the story is and how it's going to serve the readers, and the third paragraph, most importantly, why you're the person for the job, then they're like, it's worth taking a risk to have this outside person come in and have a conversation about this potential piece. That's a whole different level. And that's kind of the journey that you're going to go through if you're going to get a freelance article published. Very few publications are 100% freelance. Most of them have some type of internal writer, or they call them contributing writers, in some cases contributing editors. It's something called the masthead, which is at the beginning of every magazine. It's also on most blogs, where it'll list out the editor-in-chief, the publisher, who owns the publication. All that is called the masthead. That's all those people are on staff. If they're on staff and or regular contributors, then you need to cut through that to get an article published. It's really key to understand that there's a whole dynamic that's happening out, and they have a whole system that frankly has nothing to do with you. Your job is to make sure that their system is on top of things. I did a keynote a handful of years ago, quite a few years ago actually, for ASJ. It was back in San Diego, back when I lived over there. They had a joint meeting, ASJ and SPJ, the Society of Professional Journalists. Shout out to y'all. And I was like, why journalism matters even after journalism. And it's worth checking this keynote out, just because I talk about how we're in a bit of a post-journalism phase, particularly at the time. This is a good 6-7 years ago. We're at a post-journalism phase where magazine sales were going down. Newspapers, obviously, were going through what they're going through, still going through. And we were pivoting to video. Ironically, I'm telling you on video. We were pivoting to video and other things. And me explaining why journalism still matters, though. It's just in a different form. And I break down exactly why it's so valuable that you build your own brand and not be dependent on an outside magazine to get notoriety. It's really important that you build up your channel. Like in my case, it's really important that you build up your newsletter list, which I've talked about ad nauseum here. Go through the previous episodes, particularly the marathon I had a few days ago with making things profitable. The link is below. I get into that, but check that out. It's important for us to build up ourselves and not just depend on such and such giving us the shine. So sometimes you have an article that you want to get out there and no one's rocking with it, or the publications don't hear you. And sometimes you got to publish it yourself. One of the reasons why I started this channel, and there's so many things I'm able to address here, so many ways I'm able to do it, that the publications and the folks I was working with didn't quite see. And sometimes make your own way. And that's an important part of the process. Excuse me. If you're going to go through your process as far as making a living as a writer, and we'll talk about this more in the next question, highly recommend Six Figure Freelancing by Kelly K. James. Hope you're doing well. I have her book around here. It is dog-eared, but again, as I say almost every episode, my boys move stuff around. It's somewhere in the house, but it's been with me for a while. She's fantastic as far as breaking down how to make a living as a freelancer, what you should talk about. She is a former lawyer, so she doesn't mess around with the numbers and the time. She messes around with the numbers. You know what I'm trying to say. She takes it very seriously, which makes her fantastic. It is worth checking out the book. Excuse me. And as you start to go through your process it's important to find some type of, what's the word I'm looking for? Levity. To stay grounded. That's what I'm trying to say, to stay grounded. One of my favorite books, period. One of my favorite books. I have the old school version. Yeah, y'all don't have this. They don't make this one anymore. You see, it's dog-eared. Dojo Wisdom for Writers. Excuse me. Jennifer Lawler. Fantastic. It is short. It is sweet. And what folks will not tell you about freelance writing, if you decide to make it a full-time profession, or even if you do it on the side, it can be very, very hectic. You can have editors that come in and want last-minute changes, but they're about to go to press, which means that they're about to publish something. So that means you can do it quickly. You might have certain sources, which means people that you're interviewing, and you might not be able to access them in a certain way. And so you're trying to do this with a deadline and all that stuff. It's even the financial ups and downs, which we'll get into in a minute. This helps you stay level. It's a fantastic book. As you can tell, this is my old copy. The new version's out. In fact, I think it's under Jennifer's publishing imprint, which is fantastic. You know, I rock with that. I got Bring It Worth Publishing. Shout out to Jennifer. You know, I love you over there. It's like, yeah, Damon, I'm going to go ahead and become a freelance writer. I'm going to do this writing on the side. But how do I get paid? How do I get my money? I'm glad you asked. Usually when you do a freelance article, you get paid in one of two different ways. The first way is by project, by completed article. I'm going to pay you $500 for this article, right? The other way is to get paid per word, which sounds bizarre if you're not used to this. So it could be 25 cents a word, it could be 5 cents a word, it could be $3 a word. Now, that doesn't mean that you can do a bunch of run-on sentences and just keep going. What it means is that there's a particular structure or framework for that article. Back to the Playboy example. I did a feature for Playboy, and that feature was 1,000 words. But before I earned the right to do that feature, because I did a lot of articles before I got that Playboy feature, I was doing articles that were literally 50 words long. They were little reviews. If you guys are old school Playboy back in the 90s and in the early aughts, you know what I'm talking about, the reviews up front. So it'd be 50 words, 75 words, whatever. What happens when, as far as getting paid though, is that the length might not matter as much when it comes to per word. The length might not matter as much because they're paying so much per word. So when I was writing for Playboy, they would pay between $1 and $2 a word. So it's like, all right, so I'm going to write this 100-word review and I'm going to get $100, $200 word. And I'm a fast writer, really? We became fast friends. Or it could be a publication, maybe a smaller publication or one with a smaller budget, whatever, where they're like, yes, we're going to give you a 5,000 word piece. You're like, great. What is it per word? Oh, well, it's, a penny a word. What's that, $50? So in that quick example, that 5,000 word piece I might work very hard on, or at least it'll take a long time to write. And I'm a professional writer, so it might take you longer, right? That 5,000 word piece, you're getting paid less than you would for this 50 to 100 word piece that you're getting paid a lot more for per word. So those are things to go ahead and keep an eye out for. If you're not getting paid for the article that you're doing, then I wouldn't actually consider that freelance writing. I would consider that publicity. I would consider that getting some clips. Clips are basically articles, so clips, because you have to clip them out. It's old school, so newspapers or a magazine, you literally clip them out. That's why they're called clips. So you're getting your clips up, et cetera, et cetera. That's cool. But know that you're getting into that. I've definitely done some articles for free, but that was because I had a book to promote, or I really believed in that particular organization. I looked at it as nonprofit work. Break it down. Don't justify it after the fact. Just think about it before you get involved. I think it's really important to have that breakdown right there. A related episode. 3 reasons why you shouldn't sign a contract. I share this episode with all my clients. I think literally all of them have gotten, all my coaching clients have gotten it. If you're going to do stuff with your article after the fact, and we'll get into reasons why you want to do that in a moment. If you want to share it with a different website, even if you want to put it on your own website, or you want to do the article for someone else later, you have to look at the contract that you sign. Because depending on the contract, whoever you publish it with, whoever does they call it a first run, whoever does the first run of that article, where they publish the article, that might be it. And that is what it is. They own that. It's like they wrote it. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, you need to be strategic about what you're doing with that. Even if you're like myself, where I was a longtime freelance journalist and then I got into books. There were certain articles that I wrote that I could not contractually include in my books later because of the contract I signed. So it's really important. This might be, if you're looking at freelance writing, this might be the most important video and suggestion here when it comes to watching something. The other books are great, so get all the books. But as far as watching something, this is the one. Like, that's why my face looks really serious now. Like, don't play with the contract. Make sure you know what you're getting into. Because if you actually own your stuff, you can do something with it. This is The Passive Writer. It was written by myself, as well as with Jeanette Hurt, who had the shout earlier. Hi, Jeanette. This came out, oh my gosh, has to be 5 years now. This came out 5 years ago. And basically what we're breaking down, all the links are below, by the way, if you want to check it out, because I'm going to take the link off for a second. We came up with this book when we realized there are so many different ways that people were freelance writers, creating content, working really hard. Like, it could be a tough profession, working really hard, and then only doing one article based on that. I'll give you a really quick example. Let's say you're doing a 5,000 word piece. For a 5,000 word piece, let's say it's not opinion. Let's say you have to interview people. Maybe you're interviewing. Sorry, my mic's in the way. My book's in the way of the mic. Let's say you're interviewing people, interview like 20 people, which I've done before for shorter articles. But then you only end up using like 3 of the interviews. And then maybe there's another article in there, but that's not the article that's right for that audience. That's not what you're contractually obligated to do. And maybe the piece ends up being 15,000 words, but you only use 5,000 for the actual piece. If you have the right contract, you can actually do other things with it. And passive income, I have lots of videos on it. You can click the links below. Passive income is your way of creating something once and getting paid multiple times. The books I create, even some of the articles I create, even the stuff with this show, that's bringing in types of passive income so that when I'm hanging out with my kids or my wife, or I'm on the road, or even when I'm sleeping, which hence the subtitle, even when I'm sleeping, that money's still coming in. That is such a key part of it. We break it down and give all that kind of insight, hopefully, when it comes to passive income. So be sure and check it out. It's been well received within the writer community. So thank y'all for all the support. I think it just had a 5-year anniversary. I can't believe it's that old already, but it's still extremely relevant, maybe even more relevant now because, a lot of us are hustling, trying to figure out what we're going to do next. Another Q&A that I did, another live stream, about a year and a half ago, become a well-paid writer. This gives a lot more gems and even goes deeper on some of the stuff that we discussed today. Be sure and check it out if you want more insight. And I have a couple bonus content things here too. This one came out relatively recently, Beginner's Guide to Making Freelance Money. I think we're going to have an episode in the very near future that updates this as far as going deep into making money as a freelancer. Right now, we talked about pitching today, but we'll go a little bit deeper into financially what goes into it. And it gets more into the contracts, but also as far as having longevity in the game. Myself, my co-author Jeanette, and even other folks such as Jennifer Lawler, we've been in the game for a long time. There's reasons for that. And so I'm happy to go ahead and share as much insight as I can as far as getting paid as a freelancer and going from there. This is an excellent start though. And this is about 25, maybe 30 minutes long. It is worth your time if you're even waddling into the freelance market. My last suggestion, make infinite freelance money. It is not hyperbole. It is actually true. I talk about this 3-bucket system that allows you to continue to make a living as a freelancer and not have too much feast and not have too much famine. It's only 4 minutes long. Highly recommend this video as well. As you get into the writing game though, yeah, not gonna lie, it's the contract. It's the contract one. You got to get your contracts right. Otherwise, you might be hobbling yourself later and not even realize it. There's the business, which is the creative work that you do. And there's the business of the business, which are the taxes, which are the invoicing, which are the systems you have in place. A lot of stuff that I coach about. Those things are so important. If you don't have the business and the business together, you're not going to be able to survive to actually do the creative work that you want to do. My name is Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. My main thing is help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. Today we're going to talk about contracts. They can be pretty boring. I personally love contracts. I took a couple of law classes when I got my journalism degrees. I found it fascinating, and that's one of the reasons why I became a coach, because we end up working with what's called intellectual property, or IP, and that ends up being what we create and how much we're able to own of it, if we own any of it at all. There's been so many people in rap culture. I've heard about a lot of them lately. There's been people in the artist community as far as fine art, where particularly lately in 2022, I was talking to a friend about this, but we're still not reading contracts. And there are people that are doing killer, amazing work, but their contracts are wrong. Again, that's a big part of the coaching that I do, is helping folks like yourself get their contracts straight. Now, I am not a lawyer. I took a couple of law classes, but I am not a lawyer. But I do understand how to hold on to intellectual property, how to think about intellectual property, and most importantly, how to help you value your intellectual property. So today we're going to talk about 3 big red flags that you want to look into before you sign any type of contract, whether you're an independent creator like myself, or even if you're signing up for a job. Again, my name is Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. You're watching the Bring Your Worth show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. If you're liking this kind of content about passive income, about creating your worth or building your worth, or even showing up in the way that you want to show up in your career and in your work, be sure and subscribe. It's always free. And share it with people that you like, even like the video if you're feeling it. All right. So again, I am not a lawyer. You better call Saul. You better not call me. Be sure and get legal advice if you're getting into really big contracts. I have a couple lawyers that I've worked with, even though I know law fairly well when it comes to intellectual property, but I still need help and support. And I want to share some of that wisdom with you so you can at least get started with thinking about this process. All right. So when you're looking at a contract, the number 1 red flag, or one of the 3 red flags, I should say, is something that's called a work for hire. The work for hire is literally what it sounds like. You're working for someone for hire. It's the equivalent of getting hired for something and then not owning what you're actually doing. It's equivalent of you going into someone's house and helping them with their plumbing. You don't own a piece of the house, right? You're not going to live in the house after the plumbing's done. No, you're going to go ahead and use the plunger, do the roto-rooter thing, take the snake, which if you're a homeowner, you know exactly what the snake is. You're going to fix it. You're going to get paid for it, hopefully, and then you'll never talk again. You don't own any piece of it. That's what work for hire means. Someone's hiring you to create something. Now, if you're creating a book, a piece of music, an article, even something that's even more complex than that, if you sign something that says work for hire, that means you have no legal rights to whatever you're creating. Now, there's a few things that you can deal with work for hire. The first approach, if you see someone that's asking you to do a work for hire, is to not do it. Now, to not do it or to refuse to do it, you need to figure out if you're actually going to be doing something else with the work. Now, I have several passive income streams. I have a whole litany. I think litany is the word. You would think I wasn't a journalist, but I actually am. I have a whole litany of videos related to passive income. I'll be sure and put a link in the show notes. But my passive income comes from me knowing 5, even 10 years ago, that some of the work I would be creating, I'd be able to repurpose for something else. For instance, I have a column with Inc. magazine at inkdamonbrown.com. When I did the column, I started like 6 years ago with Inc. I negotiated the contract, or at least made sure the contract was clear, so that they would understand that once I created a column for them, I could actually use it for other purposes. A lot of those columns became the genesis of the Bite-Sized Entrepreneur. I have Ultimate Bite-Sized Entrepreneur, but the original Bite-Sized Entrepreneur became a bestseller about 2 years after I started the Inc. column. So if I didn't negotiate that contract and have that vision and say, the stuff I'm writing for Inc. might have another purpose, then this major passive income stream, and in fact, the beginning of my book imprint, Bring Your Worth, would never have happened. If it did happen, it wouldn't be with that same content. So me talking with Inc., I knew a few years later I might be doing something else with the content. So I made sure it wasn't a work for hire. The second way you can deal with a work for hire is to make it a short-term or short-run ownership. For instance, if you're working with a company or organization, you might say, you have exclusive rights. That's the term. You have exclusive rights to whatever I'm creating. But after 6 months, you can hold on to some of those rights and I can actually go and use it somewhere else. Again, this becomes really useful if you're a journalist. If you're creating a piece of music, it might be exclusive for a particular movie, for say that run of the movie. But as soon as the movie's out of the theaters or out from Netflix, whatever, maybe you get the rights back and it can be put somewhere else. That could be a middle ground. The last way you can work with a work for hire is actually lean into it, but actually ask for more. I actually wrote for a major publication and they said there was no way I can get out of the work for hire. In other words, whatever work I was doing for them, they would own it forever. It's called in perpetuity. Perpetuity. See, I can't even say the word. That means forever. So we will own this forever. There was no way I could negotiate my way out of it. Instead, though, I said, listen, this work is valuable. Y'all are asking me to write for you, so I have a certain expertise. If you want to hold on to this work, you got to pay me more. And they agreed. So I'm being paid, I want to say about 50% more than what they were actually saying in the first place. So they kept the work, and I was able to pay a lot more of my rent. So there's ways you can negotiate with the work for hire, but you do not just want to sign it. Second red flag when it comes to contracts is no set payment date. Now, a lot of us get excited, particularly when we start off and we look immediately at how much we're being paid. Oh my gosh, we're being paid $1,000 for doing often the work that we love. And we're like, yes, $1,000, that's fantastic. Where do I sign up? What we often forget is when we're going to get paid. Because they can promise $1,000, but if it's not going to come for a year, it's not going to matter, particularly, again, we have rent due. And so there's a couple ways that you can deal with if there's no set way as far as knowing when you're going to be paid. The first way is to get pushback and say, what is the net? Net is the average amount of time that you can expect to get paid for, or actually the set amount of time, I should say. So if someone says net 30, then that means within 30 days, you should get a check, 30 days after you invoice them. So push for the net. You can ask the accounts payable people, they're called AP. You can ask the organization or the people that you're working for directly, if you're working directly with a creator, and say, hey, what's the net on this? They will understand. The second way to deal with it, if there's no set pay date, is to ask for part of it in advance. Now, I've asked this for like my bigger projects, but even some of my smaller projects, where I say, hey, if you want me to get involved with this, then why don't you go and give me half up front, and that'll keep both of us honest. I have the half, I can get started on the work, and when the work is done, complete, accepted, then I can get the other half of it. So we both have skin in the game. What you don't want is to be creating something or to be building something, and then you might get paid in often a distant future, or worst case scenario, which I've been in several times over my decades as a freelancer, you don't get paid at all. That sucks. Your time is your money. You're running a business. As I say all the time, there's the business, which is the creative work that you do, and there's the business of the business, which are the taxes, which are the invoicing, which are the systems you have in place. A lot of the stuff that I coach about. Those things are so important. If you don't have the business and the business together, you're not gonna be able to survive to actually do the creative work that you wanna do. And we want you to survive, right? So number two, you can go ahead and get part of it in advance.
If there's no set pay date or if things feel a little bit vague, finally, you can ask to get paid up front. But when you get asked to get paid up front, number one, you have to be confident about it. Number two, it helps if you have a track record. When I ask to get paid up front, people see that I've written for these publications. They see my best-selling books. They see me on this YouTube channel. They're like, oh, okay, he's not gonna take the money and run. But most importantly, if you're able to get that credibility through your confidence, through your work ethic, even getting a cosign, if you're connected to somebody else and someone else in your network says, yes, Damon's good for that money, offer them something. When I do major speaking engagements, when I have major projects, often what I'll do is actually apply a discount. So I'll say, you can go ahead and pay half up front and half when the project is done. Or you can pay the whole thing up front and save 5%. Now that might sound crazy when you're talking about 4 figures, even 5-figure projects. That 5% could represent 1,000 or two. So you are gonna eat a little bit of that. But if you think of on that grand economic scale, as far as what else you can do with that money, the opportunity cost of you not having that money, etc. Even as far as the peace of mind of knowing that you've already been paid for this project. So you don't have to hunt people down to invoice them. Not to mention security as far as knowing that you've been paid. And so if they disappear or if there's issues, they're less likely to do that. Number 3, this is the biggie. I think it's the most important thing, is not having a contract at all. Number 3, you need to have a contract. If you're listening to the music right now, it's from Purple Fluorite, awesome producer, love their music. We go way back. My mug, Bring Your Worth. It's available at damonbrown.com. Sorry, damonbrown.net. I don't even know my website. It's available at damonbrown.net. It's a collaboration between my cover designer of all my independent books, Beck Loss, shout out to Beck, and my partner, my wife, who was very crafty, and me, because I designed it. So we split the money every time y'all buy one of these mugs. The trailer video, if you've seen my speaker reel, it's done by Neha Tawari, who's actually the founder of Version Consulting. She designed the whole thing. Her and I go way back. Every single one of these instances are people that I know intimately, such as my wife, people who I go way back with, like Purple Fluorite, or people that I've known for several years, like Version Consulting. All these instances, we had contracts. We had signed contracts, or at minimum, we had emails saying, this is how we're going to distribute things. When someone buys a mug, this is how it's going to be spread out among us. This is going to be the profit, this is the cost. All of them respected it because I respect them as a business person. This is important for several different reasons, which is actually so many reasons I can't even get into all of them with the video. The top 2 reasons. Number 1, relationships change. There's people that I've started businesses with, there's people that I've connected with. For some of them, we're cool. For some of them, we were cool before, we did the project, and then we haven't spoken in years. But our money from our royalties still come to the right address. Things are still split up correctly. Often we'll say we'll do a handshake or we'll write it on some random napkin. We'll do that based on the relationship we have right now. But relationships, all of them evolve. And there might be people that you collaborate with, that you work for, that you might not even get along with in the future, or you realize how they really are as far as how they work, and you realize you don't want to work with them anymore. Or, this happens often, if you end up being like myself, you do a lot of independent work, the person that you report to, they suddenly leave, or they're let go, or the departments shift and they end up being promoted. And suddenly you have a new point of contact. But your old point of contact is the person that knew the contract. They knew how much you're supposed to have. They knew what kind of rights it was, whether it was work for hire, first run rights, as we say in journals or whatever. They knew all the information. That info is gone. Now, if you're lucky, they can pass on that info to the next person. But the next person ultimately is in charge. I've been a journalist, a creator, independent freelancer for decades now. There's so many times where I've had a solid lock into a particular organization or culture, and that person suddenly left, and they have to build that over again. One of the things you can't build over again is a contract. That's number one. So it's the relationship part of it. But number two, why you should absolutely have a contract is that there's no reason why you should keep all this stuff in your head. I created these mugs with my two partners about 4 years ago when Bring Your Worth came out. Shout out to y'all who have supported it all this time. Do I remember the percentages? I've done like 4 books since then, so I guess I can probably spout them, but I don't have to. And neither do my two partners in creating these mugs or this t-shirt for Bring Your Worth. Build From Now. My Build From Now t-shirt. They don't need to do that. It's already written. So it's not that like I'm getting of old age. It's not that other people aren't reliable. It's not that, we have these bad memories. It's just one less thing you have to worry about. So since I've done the Bring Your Worth mug, I've done these t-shirts, I've done other work, those things pile up over time. Right now I have a few dozen passive income sources. Each of them have their own percentages, including the mugs and the t-shirts and other work that I do. I don't need to keep it up here. And I don't even say, God forbid, that day when I'm gone, happens to everybody. You don't get out of here alive. Those contracts are in place. Those flows are in place. Those systems are in place as much as possible to actually get it to the right people so that that percentage that I get from my passive income sources, including Inc. magazine, including the work that I'm doing with the mug, including the stuff I'm doing for major organizations, those will flow into my bank account. They'll flow into the correct properties because those contracts and those systems are in place. That is part of creating a legacy. So it's something that no one else has to worry about. It's not about when times are quote unquote good. And it's not about when times are static. It's about times changing. And the secret is that things always change. The partnerships that I have, including the ones I talked about, even the one with my wife, they've evolved rapidly over the years. And so why shouldn't things be put in place so that things can evolve from that? And it might be that some of the contracts that you create have to be updated. And that's okay too, but you need some type of foundation to create from. So as you dive into your creativity and get into the business of what really inspires you, you will absolutely sleep better, you'll have a better career, and frankly, you'll be a lot safer and secure if you create a foundation based on the business of the business. And that foundation is based on good contracts.
As a freelancer, it's possible to be extremely busy, to have clients coming in, and still be really broke. I've been a freelancer for multiple decades now, too long to count. And one of the things that we learn along the way is that things go in cycles. So there's highs and there's lows, no matter how much passive income, no matter how many clients you got. But there are ways to see those issues as they're starting to come up. I found that there's basically 3 buckets that we always want to keep filled. And when those are off balance, we tend to get into trouble. The first one is getting new clients or getting new work. The second one is actually doing the work of our business, whether it's writing or painting, whatever it happens to be, coaching in my case, since I'm a business coach. The last one is getting money. That's live invoices. That means invoices that are out. That's money expected of you. That's money in your bank account. So let's look at how these buckets, when they're off balance, can really screw you up. Now, the first one is when you have lots of outgoing discussions with potential clients. You're doing the work, you're busy as heck, but you're broke because no money's coming in. This is a fairly common one, actually the easiest one to resolve, because the main thing you need to do is hang in there. This is where passive income and keeping a really lean business work out. As Seth Godin says, if you're able to stay in the game, then you win. Whether you have to get lean, whether you have to figure out some money moves, this is a temporary pain. The second situation is that you're talking to new clients and getting new potential work, and you got money in the bank account and you have money coming in as far as invoicing, but you're not actually doing any work. This is the best time to actually sharpen your sword. This is when you can take classes, whether it's YouTube University, watching folks like me, or taking official classes. It could be a time to read new books. It could be a time to sharpen up your stuff. Now, I always talk about I raise my price every year. Yesterday's price
is not today's price, to quote Fat Joe. The key thing about that is that you should raise your prices every year, not because of inflation and all those different economic things, but because you're actually better at your craft. When do you get better at your craft? Doing the work helps, but also helps when there's a little lull in the meantime. Now, the important thing is to be thoughtful about how you spend your money again, because remember, you don't have any new work coming in. You just have potential new work. And you can get into trouble really fast if you're spending money based on some promise an editor or someone else gave you, and you have money in your bank account, so you think everything's okay, and you might not be okay. The last instance is actually the most dangerous, and that's when you're super busy, you're working day and night, and you got money coming in, you got money in your pockets, but you're not actively looking and building new clients. This is the most dangerous because it can feel like you're doing fine. You are so busy, you think the work's going to keep coming in. And you have so much money, you're thinking that the invoices are going to keep coming in. But there's been so many instances myself and other experienced freelancers even have dealt with where we finish that last book, we do the last project, we give a little sigh, we're like, great, we can invoice that. And then we realize we have nothing to do. And we're not going to have anything to do, in some cases, for months. In some cases, I've had a year where I'm like, I don't know what my next piece of work is going to be. So the key thing is to stay connected to potential clients, to your communities, to the people that you want to serve. I do that by going to the TED conference, by connecting with folks, again, through this channel. All these different things help me stay plugged in into people that I can support. There will be droughts as much as there's feast. Your main thing that you can control is how you show up. One of the toughest things when it comes to freelancing, doing any independent work, even doing your own startups or being a founder, is when things get tough, particularly when there's a drought. It happens, it's part of the cycle. You might not have done anything quote unquote wrong. It's just the way that things work, particularly in economic climates, which is a more macro scale, and then even with stuff going on with your clients, and they might be having their own financial troubles, and that affects you. So there's different ways that you can actually get through a drought, getting through these cycles of feast and famine. My name is Damon Brown. This is the Bring Your Worth Show. I come to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. Feel free to subscribe. So one, as far as getting through a drought, you want to keep your relationships fresh. This is something that works no matter what, is you staying connected to the people that you serve. They're often the people that actually get you paid. We sometimes will only do those connections or do the groundwork, do the networking when we're in a drought. That's not the right approach. The right approach is to continue to keep those relationships connected, even when you're busy, even when it's feast, even when it's famine. Because sometimes we'll get into this crisis situation and then we'll start hitting people up, check our email, check our text, check our social media DMs, and realize they reached out to us 5, 10, 20 months ago, weeks ago, whatever, and we didn't even get back to them because things were fine back then. But now that things are in a drought, we want to talk to them. That's not the dynamic you want to create. If you want to be a freelancer, if you want to be an independent creator, if you want to own a business in the long term, you have to go after what Simon Sinek calls the infinite game. It's not a matter of winning today, but about building relationships so that you two can win forever. When you're working with a client, they have their particular needs. So it's not a matter of you coming to them whenever you need some money. It's a matter of you staying connected with them because they might need a whole bunch of work and you might be busy, but then suddenly you're not busy and they're not interested in hearing about what work you need now. When you're in these feast positions, when you have a lot of stuff coming in and you're overworked, this is actually one of those good times to actually refer that client to one of your colleagues or friends who you think will do a good job with it. You're building trust, you're taking care of your client, of course you're taking care of your friend, but also you're taking care of yourself. Because they're going to remember when you hit that drought period, how you took care of them, even though you were extremely busy. The second thing is to build a side hustle or to build passive income. The first one is way easier than the second one, but we'll get into that. Building a side hustle comes down to one simple question. What do people keep asking you for? I have several videos on this. I'll be sure and throw up a link. In fact, there's one particular video about how to find your side hustle. That's really a good place to start. With my own side hustle journey, if you looked at my LinkedIn page or you're familiar with my work, you know I've had a ton of side hustles. There's so many things that I've created while I was having one main thing take care of my main income. One of those things that actually I'm known for that began as a side hustle is being a business coach. As I talk about in my books, most recently Career Remix, one of the things I talk about in the book and in the previous books is that I wasn't planning on being a business coach. But I had my first major bestseller, The Bite-Sized Entrepreneur, which came out about 5-6 years ago now. And it was super popular. I went on the road. It was fantastic. I was connecting with people from here in the States to over in Bogota to later on, which is Bogota, Colombia, and then so many other places around the globe. I was able to have these conversations. I loved connecting with y'all. And one of the things that kept happening as y'all came to my events and started coming to my speaking gigs is you kept asking for more time. Can we get a cup of coffee? Do you have a little bit of time after the Q&A? And I was totally confused because I'm like, well, I just did a 45-minute presentation, and I just had an hour-long Q&A, but you want to talk one-on-one? And then someone flat out asked, do you do business coaching? And a light bulb went off. And I think it wasn't that time, but maybe the time after that, I said yes. That's how I got into it. Now it's a major part of my income and a big part of, frankly, my career and my identity. That income source did not exist 6-7 years ago. It literally didn't exist. It was not on the roadmap. So when you're in a drought, it's a great opportunity for you to make the time to build those side hustle skills. And especially when you're not in a drought, it's even better. One of the things that helps when you are in a drought is building passive income. I have a whole playlist dedicated to it. Be sure and check it out. Any of the videos will help you get started. I have about 52 or so passive income streams. They come from my books, my online courses, from affiliates. Those are opportunities that come in every month, every week, in some cases every day, depending on the season. That's called an uncorrelated asset. The market or this particular area could be doing something, and then you have something uncorrelated over here that's doing totally something else. Now, sometimes there are going to be perfect storms where both of those things are not working out. The passive income's running low and the main income, the day jobs or whatever, are running low. But the more you separate those things, the lower the chance of those things happening. We're talking about odds. We're not talking about perfection. You are going to have droughts. That's the way it works if you're doing anything independent. That's the name of the game. It could be macro things. It could be things that are happening locally to your market or to your company. But either way, you're going to be dealing with droughts. Our thing is to mitigate that risk. Number 3, you want to keep level. Keep level. This is for the good times and the so-called bad times. What happens when the drought happens, and you might be going through this right now, is that you start getting desperate. And in getting desperate, you might be thinking about bending your ethics or doing things that are questionable. And I've had those drought moments where I was thinking about not robbing a bank, but asking for things, doing things, pushing things further than I normally would have based on the ethics that I have. It's a tough place. You've got my sympathy and my empathy. I know what you're going through. The thing is that this too will pass. So if you're focused on having a short-term career, your startup, freelance career, independent creating, and you only want to be in the game for a few months, that's your call. But if you want to be in the game years, decades, as I have, this is the stuff you want to do for the rest of your life, then things are going to turn around. Whatever decisions you made ethically while you're in that desperate situation, those decisions are part of your record. They're part of your being. They're part of how you're connecting with your audience. Those ethics, while we're in our drought, will be tested. It's no doubt about it. It becomes a question of what kind of business are you running? If you're able to maintain your ethics, knock on wood as I have, then once you get out of that drought, then your business will still reflect who you are. You want to show up the same way, whether your bank account has a negative balance or whether you have more money than you know what to do with. That builds trust. That trust actually brings in more money and more ways for you to serve the people that you're serving. The infinite game. Whatever drought you're going through, it will likely end. Whether it's you ending your business and pivoting to something else, or you getting out of the drought and suddenly your customers start to come through with the financial support that you need to keep doing what you're doing. Either way, it's going to stop. Your main thing should be keeping yourself level as you go through this transformation. Because to be honest, there will be droughts as much as there's feast. Your main thing that you can control is how you show up. If you want to learn more about passive income, I think that would be a great place to go to next. Be sure and check out my playlist. If we're going to get to the next level, if you want to get to the next level financially, you gotta get out of that loop of time being traded for money, because we can't make more time. My name is Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. My main thing is helping you as a side hustler, a solopreneur, or otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. Today we're going to talk about the 4 rules or 4 practices that will help you build good passive income. Now, I have a whole playlist talking about passive income and how we can create things and not have to work as hard, and the idea of trading time for money, which we'll get into. But I think it's also important to set up guidelines as far as what passive income is and what it isn't. So some of y'all are asking, I want to go and break it down for you really quickly. Again, 4 basic ideas. My name is Damon Brown, DamonBrown.net. You're watching the Bring Your Worth show. It's every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. If you like what you're hearing or you're into this kind of stuff, be sure to subscribe and share it with other people that you think might need to hear it. The number 1 rule when it comes to passive income is that it is not time traded for money. It's not time traded for money. If you have an hourly job, then you're making $5 an hour. You work for 4 hours, you're making $20. If you have a salary position and it's every other Friday you get paid, you get that prorated annual salary for those 2 weeks that you worked. Really straightforward, really simple. This is the traditional practice that we grow up with. Passive income is not like that. You can create something once and then get paid a little bit or get paid forever. That's what makes it so beautiful. In fact, I have one book in mind that I worked on several years ago. I spent a week working on it, and I put in a couple $100s to get the book done. That book did well enough for me to pay my rent at the time in San Francisco. Obviously, it was not an hourly rate, and obviously it wasn't salaried. It was something I created, and it created passive income for years to come. I'm still making money based on that project. If we're going to get to the next level, if you want to get to the next level financially, you gotta get out of that loop of time being traded for money, because we can't make more time. I talk about that in my book, Build From Now, How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World. It's actually a quiz you can take to understand the finite resources that we all have. So over at buildfromnowquiz.com, I'll put the link below. But what we're working with, whether it's our focus, our agility, our time, or our energy, the things we talk about in Build From Now, we can't make more of that. That's not how it works. There's only 24 hours in a day, particularly if you're like myself. I have 2 little boys that I'm taking care of. I have my partner, my wife that I'm working with. Like there's so much stuff going on. I can't make more time. But what I can do is maximize my time in creating something that's going to pay me forever. The number 2 rule when it comes to passive income is that it can continue in some form without you. Without you, it just keeps going. As I'm speaking to you, I have about 50 or so passive income streams. And so those things are continuing to sell, whether I'm talking with you and doing the show, I'm spending time with my kids, I'm on the road, I'm resting, I'm sleeping. I did a book a few years ago with Jeanette Hurd called The Passive Writer, 5 Ways to Make Money in Your Sleep. It's focused obviously on writing, but it talks about a lot of these principles as far as making money as you sleep. The key thing here is that it continues in some form without you. So if you're doing something else, if you have your day job, which is maybe the main thing that's paying the bills for you, even frankly, when you pass away, those things that you create, if they're true passive income streams, will continue. If I were to go right now, and I don't mean metaphorically, my books will continue to sell, and those royalties will go into my trust as well as to my family. That's passive income. It's way more passive than having a regular day job that gives me an hourly or an annual salary rate. Because once I'm gone, that salary is done. Number 3, Passive income requires an upfront investment. Passive income requires an upfront investment. If someone says it does not, do not believe them and run. That upfront investment could be your time. We call it sweat equity, right? Where you're working on something, you're building something, and then you hope that it gives you some type of return on investment, ROI, later. That's part of the risk. That's why a lot of people don't mess with passive income, because they want the guaranteed hourly rate or annual salary, which is okay. I'm not mad at them for that. But if you want to get out of the situation or area that you're in and elevate to the next level, particularly financially, you're going to have to put something up front. That up front could be time. That up front could be other resources like money. For instance, to get meta for a second, when I started this show a couple years ago, I was pretty much on my own and I didn't have any backing. I'm like, this is the direction that my audience, you, wants me to go in, so I'm going to rock with it, particularly when the pandemic was first starting off and all of us were sheltering into place. For me to do this show, it required me doing a lot of research as far as other people who were doing the video series, me connecting and having phone calls with people who had had successful podcasts, but also the financial investment of having the lights, the mic down here, making sure my computer was up for it, making sure that that my art was correct. Shout out to James and shout out to John. That required financial investment. I actually did a video recently, a live series. I do a live show every Wednesday, and I talked about how I was able to do all the inside baseball to get this show up and running. And it ran around $300. So I'll be sure and put a link up there and check that video out as well if you're looking or interested in inside baseball as far as how I got this off the ground and now just hitting about 250 episodes. The point is that if you're going to do passive income, it requires some type of investment up front. It's not going to be free. It's not. That's not how it works. But then that leads to number 4, which is, as far as the results of passive income, there is no cap to it. No cap. In other words, you can create something and it takes maybe a couple days, maybe a couple weeks for you to make it. And then it could give you $10, it could give you $100, and give you thousands of dollars. As I mentioned before, there are projects that I worked on and they're helping pay the mortgage now. And they were done years, decades ago. And they're still bringing in royalties, aka passive income. So there's no cap to what you can do. The challenge with trading time for money is that there's an automatic cap. Not just based on what you negotiate, but literally how much time do you have in the day? You can put in that overtime, but if you're doing 12-hour days, it's not like you can do 16. You probably shouldn't do 24-hour days of working, right? And if you go too far, you end up burning yourself out. Passive income is an avenue for you to build more wealth without burning yourself out. There's absolutely risk involved. That's why I want to go over these 4 pointers. The key thing is understand how much risk you can handle and to understand that the benefits, with no cap, the benefits are way higher. If we're all sharing ramen noodles and then suddenly you become a millionaire, there's a lot to unpack with that. All right, so your biggest client so far came through, you signed the contract, you negotiated the deal, and the money hits your account. Woo! There's nothing like that feeling. I've been independent for 2 decades plus. I still get chills whenever I get a new opportunity. Now what? Because if you've been going through a drought, you're kind of living from hand to mouth, then suddenly you have all this money coming in. There's so many people that I work with as a business coach who aren't sure what to do when it comes in. In fact, they're afraid to look at their bank account because they're frozen. They don't know what to do next. So here's what you can do once those windfalls hit. I'm Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. You're watching the Bring Your Worth show. I come to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. And my main thing is helping you as a side hustler, as a solopreneur, or otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. The first thing you want to do Taxes, taxes, taxes. Did I say taxes? Taxes. If it's a lot of money, you might want to get a financial advisor, because the amount of money it costs for a financial advisor, even if it's an ad hoc thing or a lawyer that might help you with the finances, that's nothing compared to the amount of pain that comes when you get a call from the IRS or whatever your equivalent is where you live. Number 2, remember, it is a windfall. This is not your salary. If you're independent like me, you get these big checks, and sometimes that'll be the check that you get that you'll be hanging on to for a little while. I've gotten major checks and then haven't gotten another check for like 6, 7, 8, 9 months. Did I mention I have a family, a young family, and I have a partner, I have a wife, and I have a mortgage? There's things that will regularly be taken care of that are on a monthly, weekly basis, depending on your lifestyle. Whatever windfall you get, it makes sense to spread it out. Maybe it's over the course of a year. Maybe it's over the course of 5 years. If it's a lot of money, maybe it's over the course of the next 10 years. Again, I am not a financial advisor, but what I would recommend is breaking that down and finding out how much money do you actually need. Number 3, invest in systems. If you're familiar with my work, my latest book, Career Remix, even with some of the stuff on the channel, you know I'm really into systems. Systems matter because you don't need to think about them. They're kind of like passive income. How passive income, the money just comes in. It's not active. You don't have to chase it. Systems are the same way. If you have a system in place, then you can just focus on the big picture things and just showing up. It also shields you from chaos. Chaos, in this case, I'm talking about is financially. It also is the time to invest in those systems that will actually make your business better. For instance, I have a website over at damonbrown.net. I host it currently on strikingly.com. I'll be sure and put a link down below. Whenever I have major money coming in, I will pay it for 1 year, 2 year. They even give the option of paying 5 years in advance. I don't have to worry about that. Not only from a financial standpoint, but psychologically. It gives me the brain space to be like, great, my website's set until 2030. I'm good. I don't need to think about it. What you don't want is to have that financial windfall, not to invest into those systems, and then to suddenly have a drought. You also, number 4, want to find someone you trust. Now, ideally, you do this before you have your windfall, kind of like winning the lottery. You don't want to suddenly try to make friends when you're a billionaire or a millionaire. You want to have an ongoing process and relationship with people that support you. Now, it could be a family member, whether it's a blood family or a chosen family. It could be someone that you know and respect, or even some type of mentor who's been through this before. I have a whole roster of mentors. I always have. I've been fortunate about that, but that's an active process. So when I got my first major speaking engagement, I had 10 people that I called and said, how much should I charge for this? And how should I do this? And how do I set up my books in the background and all that stuff? That was one of my first windfalls at that time. And I had people I could talk to that not only gives you guidance, but also almost like a therapist, it allows you to offload those things. We have so many things tied to money, about guilt, as far as us having money and other people not having money, having shame, as far as us not understanding if we deserve that money. If our work, and we're not sure about our work, suddenly we're getting paid a lot for it, we can actually start to undo that goodwill, that fortune, that stuff that we've earned because we don't believe it. We don't think we deserve to have a 5-figure book deal beyond these particular stages, to have our clients, banging down our door for more of our product. And if those things don't match, it can become toxic, and you can actually start to undo that windfall through many different ways. One of the ways we can avoid this toxic behavior, or at least dampen it a little bit, is by talking to someone else. If we're all sharing ramen noodles, and then suddenly you become a millionaire, there's a lot to unpack with that. Certain people in your social group might not get what you're going through, but even before you get to that point, you have to deal with how you feel about it. Since maybe being broke and being in a drought was part of your identity. I can identify with that. I know what you're going through. Talking to someone else is key. especially if there's someone that can help you on your journey because they've already been in your shoes before. Seek out that mentorship, ideally before you get that windfall.